Welcome back to Military Analysis. I'm Lamin. Today, military experts share a common assessment. Modern war does not knock on the door. It starts with a button. And the moment that button is pressed, every plan for tomorrow, from a morning commute to a parent-teacher meeting, can become meaningless within seconds or at most a few minutes. Imagine a very Japanese morning. Trains run on time, coffee is still warm, the streets are orderly, calm, almost reassuring. Then the sirens sound. Trains stop abruptly. Children rush into shelters. And in the sky, something moves faster than human thought. At that moment, no one asks whether war has begun. There is only one question left. Was Japan prepared enough? For more than 70 years, Tokyo has lived with peace, restraint, and patience. But the world around Japan has not been patient. On one side is a China that is growing increasingly assertive and ambitious. On another is North Korea, which treats missiles as a diplomatic tool. To the north stands Russia, a military power that constantly reminds the region that the history of war can return. In this environment, peace is no longer protected by goodwill. It is protected by reaction time, weapon range, and the ability to survive the first hours of a crisis. That is why Japan is changing quietly, without fanfare, but decisively enough to make any potential adversary think twice before testing its resolve. In today's program, we go straight to the most critical question. If conflict truly erupts, how would Japan respond to simultaneous military pressure from China, North Korea, and Russia? And why has a country once seen as restrained now become a strategic problem that the entire region must take seriously? As geopolitical tensions rise, Tokyo has entered a new era. The turning point came on the 21st of October, 2025. At the age of 64, Sanae Takaichi became the first female prime minister in Japan's history, taking office amid domestic political instability and a highly dangerous international environment. Personnel changes were only the surface. What truly alarmed and angered Beijing was Japan's strategic declaration. For the first time, a Japanese prime minister publicly stated that a Chinese attack on Taiwan could be considered a situation threatening Japan's survival, opening the door to the deployment of the self-defense forces under the 2015 security laws. This marked Tokyo's strongest stance ever regarding the Taiwan Strait. Some argue that Japan has become overly confident. In reality, this tougher posture is not emotional or impulsive. It is based on strategic calculations and rapidly upgraded military capabilities. In 2025, Japan approved a record defense budget of approximately $55 billion, nearly a 10% increase from the previous year, including related security spending such as the Coast Guard. The total exceeds $62 billion. This represents a major shift for a nation that avoided military expansion for decades. But money is only the surface. In March of the same year, Tokyo established a permanent Joint Operations Command, unifying the ground, maritime, and air forces, along with space and cyber units, under a single central command. The goal is to shorten decision-making time and enhance joint combat effectiveness in any crisis. Behind Japan's military awakening stands the clear shadow of the United States. Washington has not only supported Japan, but also upgraded U.S. Forces Japan into a joint command structure, enabling tighter coordination and shared operational planning in all crisis scenarios. At the same time, Tokyo is accelerating weapons modernization. Japanese naval officers have trained with the U.S. Navy to operate Tomahawk cruise missiles, and Japan has signed contracts to purchase 400 Tomahawks with a range of up to 1,600 kilometers. For the first time, Japan truly possesses long-range strike capability. These steps show that Japan is no longer confining itself to a purely defensive doctrine. Tokyo is preparing for modern warfare, where long-range, decision speed, and joint force coordination are matters of survival. Prime Minister Takaichi views the U.S.-Japan alliance as the core of national security, while actively strengthening defense cooperation with partners such as the Philippines, Australia, South Korea, and India, forming a broad deterrence network around China. Once described only as a post-war peace factory, Japan is now clearly emerging as a country seriously preparing for the worst security scenarios in a region where silence and endurance are no longer enough to guarantee safety. Today's Japan-China tensions did not erupt overnight. They are the result of years of simmering friction, especially as China has accelerated its maritime and aerial expansion across Asia, directly colliding with Japan's core security interests. One of the clearest flashpoints is the Senkaku Islands in the East China Sea, controlled by Japan but claimed by Beijing. When Tokyo nationalized 3 of the islands in 2012, China responded angrily, deploying paramilitary and Coast Guard vessels. By 2024, Chinese ships were present around the islands almost year-round. China has placed its Coast Guard under military command, equipped it with large, heavily armed vessels, and granted authority to use force under the guise of maritime law enforcement. On paper, these are law enforcement units. In reality, their operations reveal a military pressure tool that allows Beijing to tighten the noose around Japan without firing a shot, gradually eroding Tokyo's security space. China's ambitions extend far beyond the East China Sea. Beijing is building the world's largest navy. Between 2017 and 2029, it launched more ships than the combined fleets of Japan, India, Australia, France, and the United Kingdom. At the same time, it continues to upgrade long-range anti-ship missiles and hypersonic weapons, making Japan's security environment far more dangerous than before. In the Taiwan direction, Chinese fighters, UAVs, and reconnaissance aircraft operate around the island almost daily, frequently crossing the median line and turning the area into a constant front line adjacent to Japan's southwestern island chain. Any crisis in the Taiwan Strait would almost certainly spill into Japan's airspace and waters, becoming a direct threat to Tokyo. The situation does not stop there. China and Russia have moved closer militarily. In 2025, the two conducted joint naval and submarine exercises in the Sea of Japan and nearby Pacific waters, practicing anti-submarine warfare, air defense, missile defense, and coastal operations right next to Japan's key defensive zones. For Tokyo, the threat no longer comes from a single direction, but from 2 major military powers increasingly coordinating along the same strategic axis. And within this tense military matrix, Beijing has introduced its strongest maritime card, the Fujian aircraft carrier, China's most advanced carrier to date. Equipped with electromagnetic catapults, it enables stealth fighters such as the J-35, upgraded J-15 variants, and the KJ-600 early warning aircraft to launch with heavier fuel and weapons loads, extending Chinese naval air power deep into the Western Pacific. Combined with long-range missile networks, dense UAV coverage, and frequent Coast Guard pressure around the Senkaku Islands, the Taiwan Strait, and the South China Sea, Beijing now holds a relatively complete toolkit to challenge the regional security balance from the East China Sea to the southern Western Pacific. And Japan is not facing only one adversary. It must watch both the South and the North. Yet the greatest concern for Japanese security planners is not China or Russia, but a far more unpredictable variable, North Korea. Pyongyang has openly designated Japan as a nuclear target where a single reckless decision could plunge the entire region into catastrophe. Defense assessments indicate that North Korea possesses a significant nuclear arsenal and has likely miniaturized warheads suitable for ballistic missiles, along with hundreds of missiles capable of reaching any point in Japan. Many use solid fuel and mobile launchers, reducing launch preparation time to mere minutes and leaving Tokyo with an extremely narrow warning window. The most tense moments come when North Korean missiles fly over Japanese territory, triggering emergency alerts that halt trains and send students and workers rushing into shelters. Such incidents are no longer rare. In 2022 alone, North Korea launched more than 80 missiles, an unprecedented number, and has maintained a high launch tempo since. Japan is therefore forced to treat the risk of a sudden, high-intensity conflict with Pyongyang as a very real scenario. Notably, these missile tests are often timed to coincide with joint U.S.-Japan South Korea exercises, sending clear political signals. North Korea is increasingly challenging the existing security order in Northeast Asia. More dangerously, its capabilities are no longer symbolic. Pyongyang has showcased tactical nuclear warheads, nuclear-capable underwater drones, submarine-launched missiles, and especially solid fuel intercontinental ballistic missiles such as the Hwasong-18. One such missile flew for over 70 minutes, reaching an altitude of approximately 6,000 kilometers, data that demonstrates North Korea's progress toward a credible second strike capability. Each long-range test breaks new records in flight time and altitude. The deployment of solid fuel missiles with short preparation times and multiple warhead potential has forced regional strategists to reassess the level of danger posed by North Korea. Each test is not merely technical, it always carries the risk of real escalation. Pyongyang is not only racing in weapons development, but also shifting its alliances. In recent years, North Korea has moved closer to Moscow, signing defense agreements and supplying Russia with large quantities of artillery shells, missiles, and equipment for the war in Ukraine, even sending personnel for on-site support. In this context, North Korean missile tests increasingly align with Chinese and Russian pressure around Japan, reinforcing Tokyo's sense of being squeezed from multiple directions. For Japan, it is precisely the combination of nuclear capability, rapid technological upgrades, and near-total unpredictability that makes North Korea the most dangerous threat. The strongest opponent is not always the most dangerous. The most dangerous is the one most willing to take reckless risks. Faced with this tightening security environment, Japan has been forced to step out of the purely defensive posture it maintained for more than 70 years and begin building long-range strike capabilities. The first pillar of this upgrade is the decision to purchase 400 Tomahawk cruise missiles from the United States, approved in late 2023. This opens the ability to strike enemy launch sites, bases, and logistics hubs from distances exceeding 1,600 kilometers. Japanese Aegis destroyers have already begun training, with the first operational capability expected in the coming years. This is a strategic shift, laying the foundation for long-range counterstrike deterrence. Beyond imports, Tokyo is accelerating domestic development of its own long-range missile triad. On land, Japan is upgrading the Type 1-2 missile into a new variant with a range approaching 1,000 kilometers, deploying it along the southwestern island chain from Kyushu to Okinawa. This creates a network of mobile, concealed launchers capable of controlling approaches from the East China Sea. Under the sea, Japan is developing a new long-range submarine-launched cruise missile using existing torpedo tubes rather than vertical launch systems, reducing costs, speeding deployment, and enhancing stealth. In the Air Self-Defense Force is fielding long-range air-to-surface missiles such as the JSM, enabling F-15 and F-35 fighters to strike from outside enemy air defense range, adding another layer of long-range deterrence. The second pillar is a multi-layered missile defense shield aimed directly at emerging hypersonic threats. These weapons travel at extreme speeds and can maneuver unpredictably, rendering older interceptors ineffective. In response, Tokyo and Washington have launched the Glide Phase Interceptor program to destroy hypersonic weapons during their glide phase at high altitude. At sea, Japan is significantly strengthening its Aegis missile defense. 2 large Aegis-equipped vessels are under construction, each carrying up to 128 vertical launch cells and high-power SPY 7-phased array radar. Together with 8 existing Aegis destroyers, they will form a multi-layered surveillance and interception network capable of countering ballistic, cruise, and future hypersonic threats. If plans proceed on schedule, by the end of this decade, Japan will operate around 12 major ships with ballistic missile defense capability, creating a maritime fire shield broad enough to protect the country from north to south and west in an increasingly high-risk security environment. The third pillar is unmanned and space-based surveillance. Japan is shifting away from reliance on ground-based radar toward long-endurance UAVs and military satellites, enabling wide-area, persistent observation that is harder to disrupt. UAVs such as the Sea Guardian can remain airborne for dozens of hours, monitoring vast maritime areas and transmitting real-time data to command centers. At the same time, Tokyo is rapidly expanding its satellite network to detect North Korean missile launches, monitor maritime activity, secure communications, and protect orbital assets against anti-satellite capabilities being developed by China and Russia. All of this data flows into the new Joint Operations Command, operational since 2025, unifying land, sea, air, space, and cyber domains under a single command and significantly shortening decision-making time during crises. The United States has upgraded its command structure in Japan to align with this model. Meanwhile, Tokyo is investing billions of dollars in ammunition stockpiles, shelters, fuel reserves, dispersed airfields, and redundant communication networks to ensure the country can continue fighting even if major bases are disabled. Long-term, Japan is betting on the GCAP next-generation fighter program with the United Kingdom and Italy, expected to enter service around 2035. This stealth fighter is designed as the central node of a highly connected combat network linking UAVs, satellites, and ground forces. With these systems combined, Tokyo expects that by the mid-2030s, it will possess a relatively integrated defense system capable of responding to simultaneous military pressure from China, Russia, and North Korea. The fourth and most formidable pillar is one that Tokyo rarely speaks of openly. Japan maintains a non-nuclear policy and relies on the U.S. nuclear umbrella. Yet, in reality, it possesses latent nuclear potential that China, Russia, and North Korea cannot ignore. Japan has one of the world's most advanced civilian nuclear industries, fuel cycle technology, and significant separated plutonium stockpiles, enough, if redirected, to build a large nuclear arsenal. Combined with its precision manufacturing base, missile technology, and satellite infrastructure, many military analysts assess that Japan could weaponize nuclear capabilities rapidly if forced to choose that path. This means that any attempt to apply nuclear coercion against Japan carries the risk of pushing Tokyo toward acquiring its own nuclear weapons, fundamentally altering the regional deterrence balance. Moreover, any nuclear crisis involving Japan would inevitably draw in the United States, which maintains forces on Japanese soil. Of course, nuclear war is terrifying, and no one wants it. Japan does not advocate it. But today, Japan is no longer a weak link, easily broken under joint pressure. It is becoming a frontline deterrent anchor in the Indo-Pacific. Rather than huddling behind passive defense, Tokyo is building long-range missiles, layered missile shields, dense UAV and satellite networks, and air-naval forces capable of striking across vast distances, ensuring that any opposing bloc must calculate the cost very carefully before attempting to test Japan. As Beijing, Moscow, and Pyongyang tighten military coordination, Tokyo responds by expanding its own security circle, strengthening the alliance with the United States, reinforcing extended nuclear deterrence, and drawing closer to partners such as South Korea, the Philippines, Australia, and India, forming a belt of interconnected states facing similar expansionist pressures. In the emerging new order, Japan is not waiting to be pushed into a corner before reacting. It is preparing in advance so that if the China, Russia, North Korea axis chooses to test fire, it will face a Japan with both the will and the tools to respond proportionally. There is a paradox often seen in our era. The countries that speak least about war are often the ones that prepare for it most thoroughly. After decades of standing quietly in the background of history, Japan is stepping forward with a clear answer to the world. Peace is not something to wish for. It is something that must be defended. Looking at the full picture, Tokyo is not acting in panic or recklessness. It is building a layered, resilient defense system designed to survive modern warfare, from long-range strike capability and multi-layer missile defense to cyber, space, and the ability to keep the nation functioning even when major bases or supply lines are hit. The goal is not to showcase power, but to send a practical message. Japan is no longer an easy target for pressure. Behind all these defensive layers lies a final card that Tokyo almost never states aloud. While firmly committed to non-nuclear principles, Japan possesses nearly all the technical prerequisites to cross that threshold if forced. Advanced civilian nuclear technology, significant plutonium reserves, a world-class precision industry, and a complete missile satellite ecosystem. Even unactivated, this latent potential forces China, Russia, and North Korea to think very carefully before pushing Japan into a point of no return. The lesson from Japan's story is simple, yet profound. In an uncertain world, security cannot be built on promises, and peace cannot be protected by goodwill alone. Only when a nation has the capacity to defend itself and the clarity to prepare for the worst does the worst become less likely to occur. Japan today does not wait until it is cornered to respond. It prepares in advance, so it never has to panic later. That is the difference between a nation that merely hopes for stability and one that has the resolve to secure it. Thank you for staying with us until the final moments. If you are still here, you are not watching for entertainment. You are thinking with us about how this world truly operates. I wish you a peaceful evening, and I sincerely hope that all the scenarios we analyzed today remain confined to screens and never become reality. Goodbye, and see you again in the next military analysis program.